Well, Congressman, thank you so much for coming on the program tonight. Great talking to you.
My pleasure, and thanks for your time this afternoon.
Oh, you bet. So yesterday, we saw some really good news, I think, for gun owners who were worried about the new regulations that the Department of Justice announced earlier this week. What can you tell us about this amendment that you offered to the Commerce, Justice, and Science House Appropriations Bill?
You bet. It is important to all NRA members. Frankly, there are those that just don't get it. The Second Amendment means something, and we want to protect it. Earlier, last December, ATF came in with a request of the Office of Management and Budget, so ATF to OMB, two bureaucratic organizations. They came in and said, we want an emergency regulation to get after these guns that we feel are going to Mexico. And so they began the process, left Congress entirely out of it. And what it was intended to do was to suggest that if you purchase more than two rifles within a certain period of time, then the dealer that sold it to you had to file a report to tell the government. And we think that's tracking, we think that's cataloging, and ultimately we think it's a backdoor way to get at gun control. And so Congress specifically did not allow the ATF to do it. They did in the 90s on handguns, and we all, accept that now. However, this is an expansion beyond, and they wanted to use regulatory authority as a bunch of unelected bureaucrats doing it. Congress, I think, did not, and should not approve of it. And so my amendment says, nope, you're not going to spend any money on the enforcement of this new regulation that was announced this last Monday.
I spoke with a manager of a gun store in San Antonio, Texas last night, and she told me that when somebody comes in, she had somebody come in a few months ago and said, I'll take these 5 AK-47s. I'll take 3 more if you got them. And her first call was to the ATF. And she said, look, I got this guy here, wants to buy these guns, and I'm not going to sell them. And she did not make the sale. But she's been told, even as recently as just a few days ago, when she calls the ATF voluntarily and says, I don't know about this one, she's been told, well, let it go through. We've got somebody in the parking lot. And then all of a sudden, weeks go by and they say, well, it's an open investigation. We've all heard about the allegations of Fast and Furious. And again, back then, you have emails where ATF agents are talking about the cooperation of the FFLs. They're alerting the ATF to these suspicious sales. They don't want to proceed with them. And yet the ATF is telling them to let the sales go through.
Plus, the FFL they're also required to keep a record of their sales.
Yeah,
and so they've already got that. And when asked yesterday by one of the Democrat members on the Appropriations Subcommittee that was in opposition, they said, well, what happens if somebody comes in and wants to buy 1,000 assault rifles? I said, the only people that are out there buying 1,000 assault rifles that are ended up in Mexico is the ATF. Come on, guys. And, he kind of tried to jerk me up saying, well, I'm serious. Well, little did he know, I'm serious, too. The Fast and Furious was a dismal failure. I don't know what they were thinking, and for them to think that somehow they're going to get at it now. The danger is in the initial consideration of this regulation from December on, they did not even have the 4 states within the southeast part of the United States, California, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas, specifically spelled out in the regulation. At least they put those 4 states in the regulation, but our answer back to them is, look, if they're willing to do it for those 4 states, what's my protection in Montana or Minnesota or somewhere else? And so, frankly, it's the old Ronald Reagan trust but verify. No, we don't trust. We will verify, but we don't trust.
Well, when you brought up Fast and Furious, I think it was Senator Grassley's office yesterday that released a copy of an email from one of the ATF officials in Washington to Bill Newell, who at the time was the special agent in charge of the Phoenix office where Fast and Furious was taking place. This was an email about a year ago. And the email from the ATF person in D.C. was asking, are there any Fast and Furious cases that we could use, because we're looking for anecdotal evidence as to why we need this particular rule change, the rule change that was just announced by DOJ on Monday of this week. So you've got email evidence showing that ATF was looking at Fast and Furious for ways to justify this very regulation that they're putting forth now.
That's exactly right. Now, I'm not sure whether I misspoke or not. I hope I did not. I might have said more than 2. No, it's two
Two.
long rifles larger than a 22 in a 5-day period. Larger than a 22, that's a 223. That's if it's got a detachable magazine, then they're going to capture hunting rifles. It's just crazy. We can't let them do it. And I just have so much confidence in the NRA. I just know that if they were ever able or successful in doing this without congressional approval, there's going to be a lawsuit. There has to be. I wish I could join in, but I think some dealer is going to have to make a point, sit down in the satchel, and say, we're not going down this path. I always say with George Bush as president, you never had to worry about gun control. You didn't have to. That's still one of the things that we had to be vigilant. We had to pay attention. With this president, they're leaking around us every way they can possibly think of. You cannot ever let your guard down. Thank God for the NRA paying attention to this issue.
Well, thank you for your hard work and everything that you're doing. Now, this amendment passed out of the committee yesterday, but that's not the end of the story. I mean, it has to get through the House as well, right?
They'll make a run at it.
Okay.
If you listen to the debate, there are people that clearly do not believe in the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, and they will do everything they possibly can to try and strip my language when it hits the House floor. I feel very successful or very confident that I'll be successful in protecting it. I've got a good friend in Dan Boren, who's been my partner on this issue. He was not on appropriations, so he couldn't help in this particular case. He'll help me on the House floor. Because they attempted to strip it when I put this amendment in House resolution this last year, at the beginning of this year. The problem is not the House. The problem is the Senate. The problem is the Senate doesn't do anything. They're not even working on their appropriations bills.
Yeah.
It has to make it through the House, the Senate, and ultimately be signed by the President. The President is not going to veto this bill for this language because he's got other fish to fry out there, even though he would probably be particularly angry that it was included. But the Senate's got to do something. We have to apply the pressure to the Senate to pass this appropriations bill for the purposes of getting it onto the President to keep this from happening.
All right. Congressman, I've got to ask you before we let you go on a entirely unrelated subject. What's your thoughts on the latest regarding the debt ceiling talks?
Well, I wish I could give you an answer. It's one of those situations that the chessboard is changing virtually, not just daily, but every hour.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those situations where I sit in the place on the House floor in the back corner. That's my seat. I've always sat there. I'll always sit there as long as I'm in Congress. And the leadership has to go by me to vote. And so I'm constantly getting updated by Mr. Cantor and Mr. Boehner because they come in and vote on my machine at my desk. And I can honestly tell you it's up in the air. We just don't know right now. But I happen to be in the category of not wanting to raise the debt ceiling until such time as we clearly get that we have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. That's why I'm on the Appropriations Committee. I chair one of the subcommittees. I'm going to come up with $28 billion worth of reductions in my subcommittee, as I came up with $20 billion worth of reductions last January when it went through. And I continue to believe we don't have a revenue problem, a tax problem. We're taxed enough already. I'm a Tea Party guy because we are taxed enough already. So I come down on the side of not raising the debt ceiling until we have some major spending reform, like a balanced budget requirement and substantial reductions in existing spending.
All right, Congressman, thank you again. A
You
real
bet.
pleasure, and look forward to doing this soon.
Thanks so much, Cam.